shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, do you have your bjshow.co flag out in front of your house? Do you have that done yet?
Yeah, but I brought it in because of the storms, Brad. In fact, the storms woke me up at like 3:30, so I went out there and I brought my American flag, and I had forgotten to bring it in overnight. And I brought the BJ flag show in too, because, there are times where you don't just need to wave the BJ flag publicly, Brad. You want to keep that private.
I think we need to go down to WashU and wave our BJ show cup flags. What do you think? Don't you think that'd be fun?
Everybody's welcome, Brad. You don't even need to be a student. And the best part is, even though Washington University, that's private property, just claim the First Amendment. Nobody knows the difference, Brad.
Well, we'll talk about that. Is that one of your top 3 this morning, by the way?
I don't know. I didn't see much news coverage of it, Brad. I guess we're just going to have to see where it ranks.
You didn't see the interesting thing how we made the national news with that?
No, I saw a lot of very peaceful people just congregating in a quadrangle, Brad. They were playing hacky sack. They were a multiracial group too, and then the campus came and took pictures and put it on the prospectus.
What's the prospectus? Is that their publication or something like that?
Well, remember, like in the olden days, if you would apply to a college, they would send you a prospectus.
Right.
It would be in the old timey days when people got snail mail, it would say, "Look at our campus; it's beautiful. Here's a small Asian girl, a large black man, and a generic white woman playing hacky sack on the quad."
Right, and they would always have a smile on their face and always look like they're enjoying themselves.
Yeah, and they'd be wearing a college sweatshirt too. They were very clean too, and most of the people at the WashU quad over the weekend were super clean too. You could tell they smelled really good.
Not good. So
they didn't smell like patchouli and marijuana at all.
So you didn't see the article I sent you about how we made the national news with that?
No, huh?
Okay, well, we'll pick that up on the
flip
side.
And you mean Washington University here in Seattle, Washington, right, Brad? I don't pay much attention to Missouri news, so you're going to have to fill me in this segment.
No, Washington University in Washington, not in Washington, Missouri, in University City, but if I'm not mistaken, part of the campus is also in Clayton as far as Richmond Heights. I believe that's the case.
Once you get on the other side of Wydown where the students live, that's actually Clayton.
Right. And on the south side, it abuts. I think part of the campus may actually be in Richmond Heights. I'm not totally sure of that, but I know, like for example, where what's the restaurant right there on Clayton Road, right across the street from the great big monstrous gas station sign.
It's a relatively new Brasso?
No. It used to be a long time ago. It was it was a bar that my boss used to hang out in all the time because he was from England, and that was his English bar. And it had hotel with it too. Matter of fact, the
Cheshire.
The Cheshire.
Yeah, and it was the cat and what was it? Cat and Mouse or Cat in the Hat?
Right, something like that.
Something like that. But the good thing is, Brad, you could ask the WashU officials. They don't have much going on today on this Monday morning. I'm sure they'd have time to answer some geography questions, Brad. Not much else is going on.
Yeah, you know the little trivia fact about the Cheshire Inn, don't you?
I don't know.
That was used in the movie Up in the Air with George Clooney.
Oh, yeah, never saw it. I heard it was a good movie, but I'm not really a movie guy. But yeah, I heard it. And then didn't he film a scene at like Richmond or like Maplewood High School or something like that?
And at the airport and also in downtown St. Louis where supposedly he was living. So, see, he was supposedly living in St. Louis, and he was living in the Mansion House apartments down there, right there on 4th Street. So supposedly that was the story. But anyway, it's actually a good movie. It's a very depressing movie, and especially now in light of what's going on in a lot of corporate America, like Tesla, where they laid off 10% of their workforce. It's a very interesting movie. And I got more car stuff to talk about, but you don't want to talk about car stuff.
Oh, good. Okay.
No,
what else do we have to talk about this morning, Brad?
That's boring stuff to you. So let's just get right into the meat of the matter. That is John Combest. Every single day he puts together this list. And I mean every single day for 22 years, never a day off. Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, whatever the day is. It could be February 29th. He was doing it. And he puts together this list of at least 25, 30 different things in the news around the state of Missouri. We do the top 3. We have a very important guy who comes into the studio. What's your name again?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And he steps up to the microphone and says things like,
in third place,
the year was 1992. Brad was putting together traffic and weather together. He hadn't even sold it to accumulate his riches yet.
Yeah, right.
A young John Combest was at a premier elite institution called Kirby Junior High School in 8th grade. And that same year, Missouri voters approved term limits, Brad. 16 years. That's all you get. You get 8 years in the Missouri House. You get 8 years in the Missouri Senate, and that's it. But guess what, Brad? A lot of pushback over the last 30 years about this. And in fact, there is a proposal in the legislature this year to tweak it a little. Now, the proposal is not to tweak the 16 years. The proposal is, starting in the year 2030, you can take your 16-year allotment of years, and you don't have to just cut it to 8 in the House and 8 in the Senate, but you could serve, for example, all 16 in the House. You could serve all 16 in the Senate. So you would still be capped to 16 years in the legislature, but you would not be limited by either the House or the Senate. Brad, what do you think of this?
I think that's a great idea, and I think they should push that to all areas of government, where if you're a government employee, you can only work for the government for 16 years on any level. And that means that if you work for 8 years in the government and then you run for office, you can actually only hold office for 8 years on both the local, federal, state level a whole bit, county level a whole bit. 16 years out, and that way we wouldn't have the swamp anymore.
Hey, here's why I violently and virulently disagree with you, Brad. Because you want a St. Charles County election employee to master the art of dealing with the public and telling Brad Hildebrand, I'll get to your email when I get to it. You can't learn that in just 2 years, Brad. You can't learn it in 4 years. It takes at least 16 years to deal with constituent requests. So that's why you're way off base there, Brad.
You don't want to hear my story of the time I was paying taxes in St. Charles County, do you?
No, I probably do.
Okay,
I probably do.
I'm in line paying taxes in St. Charles County, and the two clerks who were there side by side, very nice, talking with each other, talking about their weekend, and hey, where did you go on Friday night? Well, my boyfriend and I went out to so-and-so and so-and-so, and the service was just absolutely positively terrible. And after our meal, I summoned the manager over to our table, and I said, that server was just horrible. You should fire them. So when I got up to the window, I go, last time I was here, I got really bad service. Should I have called for your supervisor and had that person that gave me bad service fired? And the lady looks at me, she goes, you can't fire us. We're government employees.
Oh, that's exactly, they're above the law.
Yeah, it's okay if they want people fired and they don't get good service, but when they when they provide bad service, well, that's just how things go. By the way, see, this is what I don't get about government and the court systems. There's nothing going on with the Trump trial today. Why is that? Why is today off?
That's a really good question, Brad. I'm not sure. I don't have any idea why that's the case.
Do you know they ended one of the court sessions, was it last week, the week before, because one of the jurors had a dentist appointment? Did you hear this crazy story?
Well, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, you have to think if it affects national politics or if you got to get, a dental carie resolved. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why you're quibbling with that, Brad, but you have a history of quibbling. Real quick, back to the term limit story. It's very late in the session, and there's 2 weeks left. I believe there's 2 weeks, maybe 3. Let me think. 2 weeks, I guess. And so we have – I know – actually, I was wrong about that. I'm sorry. There's 3 weeks left of session. So I don't know a lot of these bills that are introduced late will be lacking traction. And if you haven't made a lot of headway at this point in the session, you're not going to do it. But again, it's one of those topics whereby – and Brad, this is a lead into number 2. You start the discussion now, knowing a bill is not going to pass, but then accepting the fact that you'll work on it a little bit more in 2025 or maybe 2026.
Okay, moving on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Were the GOP caucuses, the presidential caucuses, a big mistake? Well, a gentleman named Danny Busick from Newtown in northern Missouri says yes. In fact, he says he kind of regrets his vote a couple years ago to move the Missouri Republican system from a traditional primary over to a caucus. He said he's heard a lot of feedback about the fact that caucuses are generally inaccessible. Nobody wants to give up all that time. Why can't we just go in there and vote for our favorite candidate? It's what the Democrats do. So you could expect, Brad, that even though this bill might not pass this year in the legislature, that there'll be a lot more talk about it next year. And I imagine that next year legislators will want to do something to move us back to a primary system.
I heard that as well, too. And wasn't one of the reasons that they didn't want to do the primary was that it was less expensive to do the caucus? Wasn't that part of the deal?
Yeah, and the beauty of having it be a caucus system or having the Democrats run their own primary is that the state doesn't have to pay for it. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said for the fact that taxpayers don't have to pick up the tab and the party has to pick up the tab. Now, I would make the argument, Brad, that when you look at the overall state budget of what you would spend on a primary, it's negligible. But you could say that same thing about any government program or activity too. Yep. A little by little, they start adding up.
But we wouldn't have the great audio that we played, care of Cindy Cristofanelli. Now you got me calling her Christy Cristofanelli.
Christy Cristofanelli,
no,
yeah.
Cindy Cristofanelli of the Bill Eigel amendments at the, what was that? Was that Francis Howell North?
Yeah. Or no, I think it was Central. I think they got together at Central. I could be wrong.
I think it was North. I don't think it was Central. Okay, I don't know. One of the two. But North is the ill-fated location of where you were at when that made national news. They had to call in the police, right?
That's true. Yeah. Like fisticuffs, the arguments over hats, people giving little hat tap, little push back and forth, Brad. It was almost reminiscent of, I don't know, being at a college campus, and that could be the next story.
It was like,
You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania.
Oh,
it's the same old story with this weasel, man.
You're not Ric Flair. Apparently it was a popular decision.
And you shall feel the pythons, brother.
That's what it was like at the caucus when you were there, right?
It was like that, and I even quoted a future state senator, and I said, I don't even know where to start with all the things that have said that are just wrong here.
Okay, here we go. What was that again?
I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Okay, now here we go.
The number one.
National attention, a presidential candidate, beautiful video of fights, which is what everybody wants to click on and watch over and over again, Brad. You referenced it at the very beginning of the show. Washington University in St. Louis had a number of protests, I guess a big giant one Saturday and then smaller ones yesterday. Freedom marchers, Brad. Peaceful protesters just wanting to come on campus, make their voice heard about the attacks in Gaza. And Washington University had the audacity over the weekend to tell them, literally, get off my lawn. You have no business here. And the fallout of this, Brad, the cut to the chase, is that students have been suspended. Faculty have been suspended. There's a lot of debate about whether or not the students should be allowed to come back on campus and take their final exams. And it was pretty much what everybody wanted, I think, Brad. I think the protesters got a lot of attention. I think there was more violence, and I think there were, injuries on police officers. But it was a messy scene. The protesters got what they wanted. They got the media attention they wanted. And the university, it seems, has cleansed the campus, pardon the expression, for the moments of these protesters from the Quad. What did you think about this, Brad?
Well, you really didn't get that article I sent you?
No.
There was a presidential candidate who was arrested.
Oh, Jill Stein. Yeah. And if folks go to johncombest.com from the weekend, I had several stories about that up, Brad.
Yeah, Jill Stein, who's the Green Party candidate. She's the eternal Green Party candidate.
Yep. And she had been confronted the day before at Columbia University. I think she did maybe a photo op there. And then she came to WashU. She had an event. I guess she claims she had an event. Maybe she really did have an event here in St. Louis over the weekend. So she says she was invited to come to the protest and take part in it. So she succeeded in getting herself arrested, and she succeeded in 2 of her staffers got arrested, ceremonially. And so that, that also helps garner media attention.
But you know what? She won't be able to hold a candle to the fact that the current president, who was arrested at the freedom marches in Selma, is also arrested down in South Africa fighting apartheid. And when he was
That's true,
14 years old, he was arrested on the front porch of a black family that moved in a white neighborhood. And that was after he drove his 18-wheeler over to their house, and after he was the lifeguard when he saved the life of 22 black kids. Isn't that our current president?
He did. And what little known fact too, he actually pushed Governor Wallace out of the schoolhouse door, Brad. He chop blocked him in the knee.
Really?
Got him out of the way. And when Rosa Parks sat down on that bus, she actually sat on Joe Biden's lap. Now, what they don't talk about her sitting on his lap is that then he ended up sniffing her neck. That's kind of his thing. But that was deleted from the history books. But it turns out this was all plagiarized from a Neil Kinnock speech in Great Britain years ago. But who knows, Brad?
John, with his somebody listening is going like, who was that in Great Britain? They're going, what?
Yeah. And real quick, one of the things that for folks who haven't heard the story, this is documented in the seminal book, What It Takes by Richard Ben Kramer. When Joe Biden first ran for president in 1988, he talked about he essentially plagiarized. I mean, I shouldn't say essentially. He plagiarized a speak by a British labor leader named Neil Kinnock, who had talked about how government provides the platform. You're standing on a platform. People need help, whatever. That basic big government argument. And Biden would deliver the speech, but never gave credit to the man who came up with the speech. So it became a whole thing in 88.
Crazy stuff. Okay, first off, let's go back to the Washington University thing, was your number one story. And here you were so coy when I say, hey, you know what, the Washington University, is that in your report? Well, I don't know, it could be.
Yeah, and Brad, there's real quick, let me interrupt. A good way to see if I've seen something is I started this brand new website in 2001 where I linked to Missouri political articles. And the top story every day over the weekend was Washington University stories.
I don't know what you're going to be your top story. When I go to your site, there's dozens of stories there. How do I know?
Thank you, Brad. I do appreciate that. I'm being sarcastic. But yeah, I'm pretty familiar with some of the stuff that happened over the weekend.
Okay. First off, the interesting thing was I heard there were 5 different munis there. When I saw some of the footage, I saw St. Louis County, and obviously I believe University City was there. But I guess maybe Richmond Heights was there as well, too.
Yeah, Richmond Heights was there. So I have a link to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch story today, and this is from Michelle Moons, who's a pretty good reporter there. She's generally, by the way, Brad, you'll appreciate this, she drew the short straw, I guess, because she's a health reporter. And so she was assigned to cover these protests. So she says a couple dozen police officers from University City, Richmond Heights, Clayton, St. Louis, and St. Louis County.
Yeah, I saw the St. Louis County guys there because Clayton, the Washington University campus is in St. Louis County. It's not in the city because
Correct.
On one side of Skinker, on the west side of Skinker, where WashU is, that's considered the county. On the other side, that's considered the city.
Yes.
And the two shall not be intertwined. So the whole thing to me is, it's getting to the point where you read these stories and you hear the protesters, and Clay and Buck, if you listen to their show, they have, and also if you listen to our guys on the morning, come on right after us, Armstrong and Getty, they have the quote of the reporter who was going into and asking the various students why they were there, and the 2 girls don't exactly know why they were there.
I saw that. They had no idea.
Right. They were, hey, looks like a party. We're in, right? That kind of a thing. So, man, I tell you what.
It's pretty ridiculous. And one of my favorite guys to follow on Twitter is a guy named Chris Ferguson. And he said, when did those engaging in civil disobedience start being surprised by arrest? He said, that's how it works. That's the game. You disobey laws, you get arrested, you get media attention, stop whining for getting what you wanted. And he said, too, it used to be they would, quote, they also picked the least smelly hippies who dress nice for maximum photo op. Like, that's the way it should work, Now, in this case, this isn't what happened, But, yeah, and then you have elected officials from the city of St. Louis who clearly want attention and who want to be seen as leaders coming in and being part of the protest. And it puts Washington University in a really hard spot. And we like to give them a hard time on the show, Brad, you and I both. But they're in a spot now of wanting to defend their campus, their private property, and they're coming into this critical stretch. Kids are starting finals. If it's not this week, then it's definitely next week. You're coming up on graduation. You know graduation will be disrupted. You're probably having meetings 2 or 3 times a day to discuss what are our alternate plans for the graduation ceremony. It's a hard spot to be. Now, cynics, Brad, would say, well, Washington University invites this type of behavior by being lenient about this stuff anyway. So I don't know. I do feel for the folks who work there.
Well, I have a theory which would stop all the protests, but you don't want to hear it, do you?
Yeah, does it have to do with Old Hickory?
No. Let's take a break, and I'll give you my theory of what would stop all the protests. You're listening to The BJ Show, bjshow.co. You can find us all over the place. We're going to take a break, and as soon as I get this correct on the computer screen here, we will be right back.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?